Assalamualaikum. Today we will discuss spinal cord. We will discuss spinal cord under two headings, external features and the internal features. As you can see in this diagram, this is the structure of one segment of the spinal cord. Spinal cord mainly have two components. Externally there is white matter and internally is a butterfly shaped area or which is known as the grey matter. And in the center there is a central canal. Most anteriorly you find out anterior median fissure, while posteriorly there is posterior median sulcus. So this central canal in the grey matter is the landmark with which reference we will divide the spinal cord into anterior and the posterior parts. So the grey matter, first we will discuss the grey matter. The grey matter mainly consists of cell bodies and it consists of anterior grey column and posterior grey column. In some parts or the segments of the spinal cord you will also find out the lateral grey column. But here I draw just anterior grey column and the posterior grey column. Now comes the white matter which is outside. And the white matter mainly consists of the axons and they form the tracts, and it is also consists of the anterior white column, lateral white column and the posterior white column. Then anterior white column is present mainly in this area, the area between the anterior median fissure and the anterolateral sulcus. Anterolateral sulcus is where the anterior root of the spinal nerve will arise. This area between the anterior median fissure and the anterolateral sulcus is known as the anterior white column. While the area between the anterolateral sulcus and the posterolateral sulcus, from where the posterior root of spinal nerve arises, this area is known as the lateral white column. Then the area between the posterolateral sulcus and the posterior median sulcus is known as the posterior white column. Why we divide these areas of the white matter into these three columns? Because here the tracts or the groups of tracts are present, which we will discuss in the next lectures. So in the white matter we discuss the anterior white column, lateral white column and posterior white column. While in the grey matter we discuss the central canal in the center, then anterior grey column and the posterior grey column. These are the sulcus, anterolateral sulcus and the posterolateral sulcus. From the anterolateral sulcus, anterior root of the spinal nerve will arise, while from the posterolateral sulcus, posterior root of the spinal cord will arise. You can find out in the posterior root of the spinal nerve here a ganglia which is known as the dorsal root ganglia. Here is the dorsal root ganglia where the pseudo-unipolar neurons are present. Pseudo-unipolar neurons whose central process will go into the spinal cord, while peripheral process will go and form the spinal nerve with the anterior root. So now we will discuss the grey matter in detail. In grey matter, as I told you, we have the anterior grey column and the posterior grey column. Firstly, we will discuss the anterior grey column. If this is the anterior grey column, then we divide it into different cell groups. We have the medial cell group, then we have the central cell group, while we have the lateral cell groups. So these are the different three types of groups which are present in the anterior grey column. Now the medial cell group, it is present throughout the spinal cord. You will find out throughout the spinal cord, means we have the different segments of the spinal cord which are cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral and coccygeal. So the medial cell groups you will find in the anterior grey column of all these segments, while the central and the lateral you will find out mainly in the thoracic and mainly the thoracolumbar regions, and some in the cervical regions. Now the medial group cells mainly supply the skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles of what? Skeletal muscles of the abdomen and intercostal muscles. These are supplied by the medial cell groups or the medial nerve cell groups present in the anterior gray column. While the central group will form some nuclei which are the phrenic nucleus and accessory nucleus. Phrenic nucleus, as you know, supply the diaphragm, while the accessory nucleus supplies the sternocleidomastoid muscle and the trapezius muscle. Last one is the lateral cell group, which supply mainly the skeletal muscles of the limbs. So it will supply the skeletal muscles of the limbs. So these are the three cell groups of the anterior gray column. Medial cell group, central and the lateral. Medial is present throughout the spinal cord. It supplies the skeletal muscles of the abdomen and the intercostal regions. Then the central group form the phrenic nucleus and the accessory nucleus. Phrenic nucleus supply the diaphragm, while the accessory nucleus supply the sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius muscle. Then lateral cell group is supply the skeletal muscles of the limbs. This was about the anterior gray column. Now we will discuss the posterior gray column. Posterior gray column. What will be the structure and the nerve cell groups present in the posterior gray column? Posterior gray column, in the apical portion, here is present substantia gelatinosa. Substantia gelatinosa. Substantia gelatinosa. Then anterior to the substantia gelatinosa is the nucleus proprius. Anterior to the nucleus proprius is the Clark's column, which is also known as the dorsal column. One and the same thing. Then lateral to the Clark's column is present visceral efferent group. Visceral efferent group. These are the four regions or the nerve cell groups present in the posterior gray column. From apex to the base, substantia gelatinosa, nucleus proprius, Clark's column or dorsal nucleus, and the visceral efferent nucleus. Now the substantia gelatinosa, which is and the nucleus proprius, these are present throughout the spinal cord. You will find them in the whole segments of the spinal cord, while the Clark's column and the visceral are not present in others. Visceral efferent is only in the thoracolumbar region, and it is also in the cervical and the thoracolumbar region. While the substantia gelatinosa is responsible for which sensations? Temperature, pain, touch. Okay. Nucleus proprius is responsible for the proprioception and pressure sense and vibration. These are the sensations carried by the nucleus proprius. Clark's column or the dorsal column is related mainly with the equilibrium or the balance, and the visceral efferent group mainly related with the sympathetic nervous system. So this was all about the spinal cord structure, with which we discussed the anterior gray column and the posterior gray column nerve cell groups. I hope you understand. Thank you.